The text we're studying is the one we just recited, the foundation of all good qualities. This is the text that we're studying, and this is the text that we're, that we're trying to learn about to train it, right?
Yeah.
Lama Tsongkhapa is the author, and it's known by the name the smaller Lamrim, or stages of the smaller stages of the path.
Understand? Lamrim is the Karlaga. Lamrim is the Karlaga. Toma, ani chi nyolim gotsu panne, ani ya pantini. Yes, that doesn't Nambin Geshe Javana Jane. Sanjim Mato Jipade. Lam Ruba.
What is the Lamrim, or stages of the path? Well, it is those stages that you go through from when you begin to practice the Buddhist teachings all the way up to the state of Buddhahood, which Buddhists and Buddhist scriptures describe. The stages of the path to Buddhahood.
Understand? What's in it? They inasta Lamri Kambonchi Yole Gotsupane, Sanjay Matoji Pati Lanjeramba Ina, I Kanga, Tinji, Kanjinda Wachiresana, Kashe, and Longijo, Roa, Kashe, Yala, and Kashe ya Susu Yakuyache, Roa, Yajin Goyache, or Dusene, Kashe, Lamji Yala, Kashe, Lamji, Nijo, Roa, and Kashe ya G, Kumbet, Oyago, G.
If these are stages of the path from when you begin to practice the Buddhist teachings all the way up to when you achieve Buddhahood, then what are the different types of things you're going to find presented in here? Well, some of the things that we talk about will be actual paths. Others will be branches in the sense of supports. And other things will be methods to help inspire us to make effort and progress along the path. So in all of the different things we talk about in the Lamrim, some of them are actual paths, some of them are supporting branches, and some of them are techniques that we can use to spur us on, to develop and grow better and better.
Okay? This
although the text itself is quite short, it's comprehensive, in what it covers. All of the different points are fulfilled within this very brief text.
Okay.
So it's quite difficult, actually. The expanded version of this text is known as the Lamrim Chenmo, the great treatise on the stages of the path to enlightenment, which in English translation comes in 3 volumes. About 300 pages a volume, or roughly, that's 900 pages. The expanded version of this.
아니 다 남비치 남비 주네 제시 잡아 나지 제네 고 드니 또네 아니 하면 드지 되면 드지 요아래 년도 생각을 하지 고치고 다 베제 디토.
When we look at a text like this, then what we need to draw from it is some understanding of how you start at this point, and if you go through the different stages, you end up getting this type of result. That's the understanding we want to draw from this type of text.
Understand? That's it, money. 먼저 녀를 떼어가려고 가는데, 럼리나 러를 떼야 주무도 도마와도 지다 도마와도 아니 전부도 챔피언을 맞네. 니 만다와 숨 따요. 난 너도나 그만하고 숨 쉬어요. 쉬어요. 여봐대 가르래서는 무슨 딘나야. 주투바치. 맞다. 주투바. 지금 주무. 그러와. 아니 내 자세히는 오늘 무슨 딘나 타왔어. 그래서 제가 좋아하는 무슨 딘나 상제도. 대스인데 숨 쉬어야 돼 가르래서는 무슨 딘나를 주투바. 숨지. 주투고.
Right. The stages of the path are actually divided into three basic sections. The stages of the path that are shared with a person of small capacity, the stages of the path that are shared with a person of medium capacity, and the stages of the path of a person of great capacity. So three different sections with different stages of the path corresponding to each of these. Now, of these, at the very least, we want to achieve in this lifetime the stages of the path that are shared with persons of small capacity. Somewhat better than that would be to achieve the liberation spoken about in the stages of the path shared with a person of medium capacity. Or, of course, then the goals as described Buddhahood in the stages of the path of a person of great capacity. We need to make sure that we achieve at least one of the aims described in at least one of the sections in this Lama. Yeah. So we need to make sure that we can achieve it at least one.
Understand?
This is the purpose of going through the stages of the path.
Okay?
You might ask, is it possible to achieve Buddhahood in this life? And there are many reasons that prove that it is possible.
Well, that's
You would have to think very broadly, but it can be done. And if you can achieve Buddhahood in this lifetime, then of course you can achieve liberation in this lifetime. That goes without saying. If you can achieve the higher, then of course you can achieve the next one.
Okay.
But of course, achieving these depends on our effort. So if we're a person who can make a lot of effort, it's possible.
Okay. 탐하대. 말서 가진 요ጭ 소위 물리사지. 그다음에 나도 저시 자타를 와.
어리.
너 드나? 시와 주마다가 가진 요ጭ 소위 물리지. 딱때 니버터. 대 인지미지도.
The last is, in the sense of the lowest of these, he refers to a human life with the 8 leisures and the 10 opportunities, which Geshe has already explained, right? At the very least, we need to ensure that we will take rebirth as a human with the 18 leisures and opportunities in the future life. At the very least, we need to make sure that happens.
사람도 다운에 간지잖아. 무슨 진알이야. 딱 묘래 니스도부터 가르쳐내 야사래. 가르야쇼 가르쳐 버렸잖아. 너는 니는 어디다 이제 전부 열었지 있잖아. 너는 남비치고 토마 같이 와요. 이제 전부이 밭 같이 와요. 이제 전부이 타마 같이 와요. 이제 전부이 있잖아. 뭐래 저 내가 열어야지 또야 돼. 이제 전부래.
That's the lamrim. And so then when we think about this, we ask, well, where should our emphasis be in our practice? And what's the main practice that we should do? Well, for the Buddhist teaching, then great compassion is important in the beginning. Great compassion is important in the middle. Great compassion is important in the end.
Oh.
With great compassion.
Oh.
Yeah?
먼저 샘 나로주 제야 저주지 샘야 나와요. 남비 통로 많이 민다 오지래요. 저주지 샘야. 미 됐다 나야다. 이제 첨보세네. 진도명아 뒤고 난게 이제 첨보세. 먼저 다시 자살이 봐.
어래.
대니 다 저마다 요아래. 얘나야 된다 찌뿌찌짱. 된다. 이제 첨보 열을 제거를 쪼래 되나? 바탕 지들이요.
We're talking about a training of mind, aren't we? Now, we can use certain terms that are unique to Buddhism, like the mind of enlightenment, right? The mind of enlightenment is in the last stage taught in the sevenfold instructions on cause and effect, which Geshe already discussed. Correct? Now, actually, although there are some differences between great compassion and the mind of enlightenment, we can say that for the most part, they mean the same thing. So whether you say your emphasis is on developing the mind of enlightenment, or on practicing great compassion, you're basically talking about the same thing, aren't you?
Understand? Then when it is the chimbosa. The yes, Chev Chumisa, and then Chev Chum to my mother, there, you chimboya, Chev Jim sat there, didn't to my mother, there, you chimboya, I don't know, Chev Chimboda, Ajamja.
And hence the emphasis is on great compassion. Now the stages of the path that are shared with a person of small capacity are methods that we can use to develop and improve great compassion. The stages of the path of a person of medium capacity are things that we can use to improve our great compassion. We don't even need to mention that the stages of the path of a person of great capacity help us to develop our great compassion, because that's the main point in there. All of these stages of the path can and should be used to develop and enhance this great compassion.
Understand? Oh, that's what you're looking at. Those channels are done. Choroso looking at. Choroso the group channel for. Now, you're chewing the condition. You're chewing my what do you think? What a senior sense of what I would do. 아니 단전이야가도 저아무다바다 아니 지 산조다 레레다 뉴스도 중앙선에 셰리 우두와 근데 지금 이제 간지 따야 다시 간지는 줘 그래 같이 제구도 저도 this homework like
which means that you guys have got some work to do. Yeah, you guys have got a job, right? Because you get together from time to time throughout the week and hold classes and discussions, right? So what does it say in the section of the text entitled Stages of the Path Shared with a Person of Small Capacity? At the very beginning, they'll mention something about the proper way to rely upon a spiritual teacher. They'll talk about the meaningfulness of having a human life with leisures and opportunities, the difficulty of finding it. They'll talk about death and impermanence. Talk about the suffering of the miserable realms. They'll talk about the going for refuge. They'll talk about karma and its effects. So, how do these things work or act as techniques to develop and enhance great compassion? That's your homework, to figure out how these stages of the path help to develop and enhance great compassion.
Okay?
One day, we're all going to get together, have a bit of a meeting, and Geshe is going to ask each and every single one of you, and each and every single one of you is going to have to answer.
Okay? 다 7G도 투모한 7G 세한테 다 되는 7Q도 투모를 먼저 봤을 때 most 어떻게 가는 데서는 디파포 겨워져야 돼. 무슨 일로 셔야 쳐들어와. 대로 다시 요즘 수임을 토야 쳐도 디파포 겨워져야 돼. 7Q도 투모를 먼저 봤어.
The real essence of these stages of the past shared a person of small capacity is to abandon negativities and to accomplish virtue, right? Because you do these things so that you can take rebirth as a human with the leisures and opportunities. In order to take that type of rebirth, you need to give up negativities and accomplish virtue.
Yeah.
And that's why those are the main emphasis, main points of emphasis in those first stages related to a person of small scope.
사실은 지도 두고서야 될 가능했잖아. 대리야 아니 리니가 오지. 수스니가 오지. 두데 코인님이 그주 코인 주르선. 로. 두마데 마세. 그주데 마세. 대니 아니 과거서 대니가 돈이 과거서 계속 지셔.
In the stages of the path that is shared with the person of medium capacity, there's two different approaches the author adopts in explaining them. On the one hand, you have an explanation of the faults of psychic existence, true suffering, and then an explanation of how cyclic existence, occurs or happens, focusing on the true origins. Right? So you're looking at how, this process of cyclic existence and its drawbacks. In terms of the true origins, there are two types. There are true origins that are disturbing emotions and true origins that are karmas, actions.
Remember?
So it's these three things that are involved in this cycling, right? The suffering and the karma and disturbing emotions. Whether you call it samsara or cyclic existence, I mean, these are the three main elements involved in this cycle.
Understand?
Well, these can be explained in a more extensive manner as well, in which case you would talk about the 12 links of dependent arising. These 12 links explain in detail how it is that we take rebirth, how it is that we cycle through existences. Beginning with, from the very start, where you have the disturbing emotions that motivate the performance of a particular action, so that how you have the motivation, disturbing emotion, and the accumulation of karma, and how the karma places a seed on the consciousness, and how that seed then comes to fruition and establishes certain results. The 12 links explain in detail this process of rebirth and cycling through existence.
Understand?
In explaining the way we cycle through samsara, the universal sufferings of cyclic existence are explained in great detail, and that's done so that we can develop the determination to be free of it. If that's the case, why is it not part of the smaller scope or towards the start of the Lama? Geshe the 12 links, you mean?
Or even the Four Noble Truths. It's my understanding that the Four Noble Truths is still like the fundamental teachings of Buddha. That's the case. Something like at the start is
So, well, for instance, the Four Noble Truths, because it was your understanding that the Four Noble Truths are like the foundation of Buddhism. So, in that case, why aren't they taught towards the beginning of the Lamrim? Denshi langdor Geshe, Denbashi. Denbashi Koranze Nangbechi Tsao Duhasa, Korantende Chikosonsa. Dende Nangbechi Tsao, you know? Then Langum Gola. Then Geshe Gosara, Gam Geshe Gamma over Ginsen Carresa.
Funny, isn't it? Understand I before. She chewing about that thing on to Carre. Again, George Swing, many toya, Tashi to Syria. No, then I'm going to enroll Maria, Tashi, Jimmy June to my mother.
Think about what Geshe was saying before.
They have put him to watch.
What
Sorry.
What are the stages of the path for a person of small capacity for? Well, to take rebirth as a human with leisures and opportunities in the future, to avoid falling into the miserable realms, right? I mean, that's the purpose of those stages of the path.
Understand? Indeed, Tajin George Swing, Quarrel.
Now, this human existence as a human with leisures and opportunities is cyclic existence, isn't it? The human body is cyclic existence, isn't it? So, from the perspective of a person of small capacity, you're still striving for one type of, or one part of cyclic existence, aren't you? You're trying to adopt or embrace a true suffering, aren't you?
Yeah.
So it wouldn't be appropriate then to describe, how you ought to abandon or give up true sufferings, would it?
Isn't it?
If you're striving to achieve a true suffering, you wouldn't then explain, oh, you must abandon the true suffering.
Isn't it? Understand?
Can you see it?
I can understand basically the scope and like how the small scope and the medium scope, how they grade it. Yeah, I can understand how easy it is for the first one and the second one.
No. This is the problem. First, small scope.
What you need to understand is what a person of the small scope is trying to attain and what they're trying to give up. What does such a person want to attain? A small scope being, yeah. A better rebirth.
Maybe.
A better rebirth, maybe. Really, I mean, rebirth is a human with leisures and opportunities. What is our final aim? To achieve Buddhahood, right? But in order to achieve Buddhahood, we need certain conducive circumstances. So we need a human body with leisures and opportunities, a human life with leisures and opportunities to support us while we're working to attain Buddhahood. And that's why, you look at this, why such a human life would be an object that someone's striving to attain.
Understand?
And this is why, in the stages of the path for a person of small capacity, there's no explanation about how true sufferings are meant to be abandoned.
Too early.
It would be, as we say in English, too early to begin talking about the Four Noble Truths. Too early because at this point, you're trying to convey the need to take rebirth as a human with leisures and opportunities again and again, continuously. Yeah.
Good.
I can understand that.
Okay.
Agree, but historically that was the Buddhist first teaching. Just sort of, I can completely understand what
Mhm.
people are saying, and yes, I do find that
Okay.
it's easy, but I just sort of think that the first teaching of Buddha was.
Oh, I know. You doubt small scope. Why not explain point number 2? You think this isn't?
I can just
Is
see
it?
that over the Four Noble Truths.
Because point number 2 is very important. Buddhist teaching. Therefore, why small scope? Point number 2. Why not explain? You doubt this.
You think
Yeah.
the Four Noble Truths is so important,
Yeah.
why isn't it taught at the beginning?
Oh, this doubt now going?
맞아, 그 타가란 레데요래.
Huh?
그 gengi Geshe de goji chambo요래. 그때 코란 타가란 무트 여사.
저 덮어대 니 라야 타가나처럼 밑에 요나 다처럼 태도도 도스네.
So if you do indeed agree with what Geshe has said, then does that mean that your doubt about why about this has gone?
Because 춤이 떠서 담바 신 대신 문자한테 중간 담바 부자 쏘대 개체 수요 말해.
The reason that the Four Noble Truths are not taught in the stages of the path that are shared with a person of small capacity is because in that context, the emphasis is not on looking at true sufferings as something to be abandoned. It's a very good question that you raise.
Yeah.
But that's the reason.
Okay. 부자 가도 소하잖아. 년로도 부자 소. 년로.
In this context, the main thing that you're meant to abandon are the miserable realms.
Oh, okay. 년로 되고 중간 담바라 봐. 니나 대 부자 수요 말해.
Happy realms, are also true sufferings, aren't they? With encyclic, happy realms and true encyclicals are also true sufferings.
Yeah.
But that in this context, from this perspective, we're still trying to achieve those and avoid the miserable realms.
Yeah. Understand? It's good idea. It's very good idea. But what to say? Not to say that. 춤이 가서 만도 중간 담바 구유 담바 대하게 부셔서 아니 무대도 와대 터자 주니 자세대 춤이 가서 가야 말해.
In the stages of the path of a person of medium capacity, and true sufferings, together with true origins, are taught as things that we're meant to get rid of, whereas the true paths and true origins are things that we want to strive for and achieve. But this type of explanation is not taught in the earlier section. Yeah.
Okay.
So, but a very good question.
가르레스는 만도 무츠네. 산지 공부 주발라 가지 요치 수 임리지 이지메지 토고요. 대토야 다시.
The reason it's not taught in that earlier section is because we need to continuously take rebirth as a human with leisures and opportunities until we achieve Buddhahood. And so in this earlier section, then we're taught about the ways to make sure that we can take such a rebirth.
Okay? That you can. 저 말을 쓰면은 doctor아. 다가라. 7G. 다가라 가도 중간 담바도 군주 담바 부지 쏘체. 그러와. 무대도 로데 터지 쏘체네. 녀를 제잖아. 지리 알마도 인지면지 중 ጭ뽀 녀를 제거해야 말.
If you're capable, you can practice the teachings related to the Four Noble Truths, abandoning true sufferings and true origins, and trying to achieve true paths and true cessations. Yeah, in the context of the stages of the path of a person in small capacity. Yeah, if you're capable as an individual to practice in that way, that's totally okay. Yeah, there's no reason why you or anyone else would have to practice only the stages of the path of a person in small capacity. Yet those teachings on the Four Noble Truths are presented as stages of the path for a person of medium capacity.
Okay.
In short, from that perspective, then the attainment of liberation is what is emphasized.
Okay? What is that? What is it?
Yeah, each of the different stages, or each of the different sections has a different thing that they're mainly trying to achieve and give up. And the teachings given therein accord with that.
Okay? What is it? That's under Yanchus Tomachi, this I will. Sanji Shachu to be good. Lumber Chichiko Tambokodi, Demba Jusuma. Tagarade, Demba Jusuma.
So, another doubt that you're bringing up, that the first teaching Buddha Shakyamuni gave in this world was indeed on the Four Noble Truths. It's known as turning the wheel of Dharma of the Four Noble Truths.
Yeah. Kalirasana, Duma Shipachi, Mando, Duma, Ani, Deva, Kalsaburo. Ronja Duma Yimbala, Ani Marusu, Devan Zudea, Duma Yimba Momishiba, Marusu Duma Mamboya, Deita, Sanji Shaju to the Chitambosu Dikalia, nearly a Duma Shipachi Suni. Duma Shipachi, Duma Mone Karimba, Deva Yotaba Karimba, De Shipachi,
Buddha Shakyamuni told us to understand suffering. We hold that things which are actually by nature suffering to be pleasurable. So because we take certain things which are actually suffering to be forms of, or to be pleasurable and happiness, Buddha Shakyamuni, when first teaching the Dharma, taught us to understand suffering, so that we can, basically, he was, encouraging us to recognize sufferings for being sufferings and happiness for happiness, and know the difference between the two. Understand suffering.
Okay.
According to this presentation, then, those are stages of the path that belong to a person of medium capacity. So it's in a person of medium capacity's perspective that these teachings are given.
Understand?
These teachings also are techniques that we can use to improve our practice of great compassion.
Understand? Oh, today is done. The 7 jig launch rumba. So the Karasana, Lama Sir, Lama Suchula, Lama Tingin Java, Lama Church, Lama Suri, 7 jig launch rumba.
The emphasis in the stages of the path that are shared with the person of medium capacity is on the 3 trainings. The training of ethics, the training of concentration, and the training in wisdom. Yeah?
Also,
we also talk about the determination to be free here. Right? In the stages of the path of a person of medium capacity, we must talk about the determination to become free of psychic existence.
Understand? Or that there? Them Juma Dama Dukuju Dama Kedishananda, Tendela Juni Sananda, do not send your condition, quite essential in his Zute. Led Tombo, Anikalsa Guru, Nyamu Kunilo, Dini Lesa, Dini, Ani, Java, Duma Dama the journey. So send Doduna led to Nyamu, Jamu the journey dead, Dinu Koni dead in Jerusalem, Doduna, then count out.
The process can be explained in terms of the first 2 aspects of the Four Noble Truths, or in terms of the 12 links of dependent arising. In any case, all samsaric sentient beings, will fall prey to the disturbing emotion. That disturbing emotion then motivates them. They accumulate certain karma, and this produces certain effects like suffering, etc. And actually, samsaric sentient beings are, controlled by this process. They are bound by these karma and disturbing emotions, bound to these true sufferings.
Understand? Narusun show outside. Merdo Sandawo, Shinja Sandawo. Do you come? Korosu, Judu, Gelatin, Dudun, Gelatin, Chumbara. Jay Jones to Chudea. You put you in his Zute. Jay Jones to Chipat. just 아니 이제 니빠 가서 이제 배워나 진짜 대여를 맞도 아니 대리하라 대여 말 지 니빠 존어데 라도 지 정원도 좀
We see a similar thing in the external environment, things like flowers and fruit trees. Now these flowers and fruit trees are controlled by their causes, right? Just like any other thing, any other impermanent thing is controlled by the causes that produce it. So it only lasts as long as that its cause can sustain it. That as soon as the cause's ability to sustain it is exhausted, then it no longer remains. So these things in the external world are also controlled by the causes that produce them.
Yeah. On the top, we special samsara beings.
In addition to that, we samsaric sentient beings have something special. Yeah. Karma and disturbing emotions. Yes. So in addition to being controlled by causes, we're controlled by karma and disturbing emotions.
Yeah. Isn't it? Oh, fantastic. Nyamu sengete, jim mugoto, jaya chicken. Jaya nyamu koro yone. Ani marusuria, neka, jay nyamu zone. Dotuna nyamu seate mando, jay imba maze, jaya chicken. The day is the marusuria, misero, rawa maybe next year.
These disturbing emotions don't only act as causes, they also act as conditions, don't they? Disturbing emotions come along and act as conditions for, the arising of other things, so that they have this, they themselves have an interesting or unique place, in that they not only act as causes for this process, but they also act as conditions which exacerbate the process, which help that process along. So we are, in particular, controlled by disturbing emotions.
Oh, do so.
This is why the 7-point mind training says, banish the one to blame for all. Meditate on the kindness of all.
That's sensitive. Marusu, sensitive kasher. All come do that, isn't it? Sensitive kasher, feel like a duchache. Gel never chair. Damra chiguna. Hata sensitive ducha is then. Sensitive kala, Nando, Kuzho Sagua. Lele sensitive mare. Sensitive royal mare. Sensitive gila. Sensitive koro, let you beyond the chayore. There you think I can do chair. Only Kuzho do Dungala sopa. Chair, the new one, any koro duchacha. Koro around your mare. Lele kama koro jinyamo there.
The author of that text is talking in particular about our attitude towards other sentient beings. Where another sentient being does something, and we get angry with them, thinking that, oh, he did this to me, and this person is responsible for this thing that I'm going through, right? And we point our finger, this person is doing something bad, and thus this person's bad actions are responsible for why I'm going through this. And the author there is saying that other sentient beings are not to blame for these circumstances, because these other sentient beings are also they are powerless. That they suffer, they become, for instance, angry, and it's under the control of their suffering and their anger or another disturbing emotion that they act in the way that they do. They are just like samsaric sentient beings we were just talking about, powerless. And the negative things that they do are things that they do to the power or influence of anger, suffering, the problems they face, all different things. So don't hold them accountable, or don't put the blame on them. We should feel compassion towards sentient beings. Thinking, poor sentient beings. Cultivate compassion for the sentient beings and hold karma and disturbing emotions to be the one to blame for all.
Okay? 먼저 멸에 또 니지 첨부제. 대야지 다야 사실이다.
This is one of the ways we can use the stages of the path shared with the person of medium capacity to increase our own great compassion. Remember that the emphasis or the main practice is on great compassion. Okay. We can use these earlier stages to enhance ours. Then the stages of the path of a person of great capacity have the actual training in great compassion.
Okay?
Yeah, the main section on great compassion. We're told to develop a pure compassion. So not just to cultivate compassion or act compassionately, but develop pure compassion. Geshe has already talked about this, hasn't he? That we follow certain stages so that we can develop this pure, great compassion. Starting with equanimity, reflecting on the way that sentient beings have been our mothers, and recollect their kindness, seek to repay their kindness. Now, go through the different stages so that you can so that you begin to feel affectionate towards all sentient beings. So that you begin to look upon sentient beings and find them appealing. Yeah, literally we say, yeah, we need to apply the techniques so that we look affectionately upon sentient beings, all sentient beings. And then we cultivate loving kindness. Yeah. Loving kindness is that state of mind that thinks, may all sentient beings be happy. The precious Lord Lama Tsongkhapa says, don't just meditate in a very vague way on loving kindness, but rather, actually focus on specific groups. That first focus on, like, your family members, the people that you're close to, your friends and so forth. Develop loving kindness for them first. And then once you develop that, then focus on neutral beings. And then on your enemies, the people that you dislike. And then finally, try to extend that sense of loving kindness towards all sentient beings.
Understand?
If you cultivate loving kindness, then compassion will naturally arise. Compassion is that state of mind that thinks, may all sentient beings be free of suffering, right? You follow the same process with with the compassion as you did with loving kindness. Starting with those you're close to, and then neutral persons and enemies, and then all sentient beings. Yeah. So don't be lazy. Yeah. Meditate in the proper order.
Yeah. Otherwise,
Otherwise, we'll be sitting there thinking, oh, may all sentient beings be happy, may all sentient beings be free of suffering, which is good, but it doesn't have that great an impact on the mind. The mind doesn't really, develop very much by just thinking that, does it?
Understand? Mind change things.
There needs to be some transformation of mind. I mean, this is mind training, isn't it?
Okay.
So your mind must change. After compassion comes the wholehearted resolve or highest intention, right? Awesome. So, which is, of course, thinking that I will take responsibility for freeing all sentient beings from suffering. I will take responsibility for setting beings in happiness. That's the wholehearted resolve.
Oh, okay. 어때? 내 가르를 했잖아. 진지전에
Awesome.
실제 탐제 주말에 자야가 개인적으로 랑기 주고. 가르를 했잖아. 아니 실제 레전이 말로서 아니 수제토비 다 있잖아요. 이제 타시미 다. 진짜 실제 지정 파 딩나니 아니 파 마비바지. 그래서 맞잖아. 진짜 지 맞아. 네 생이 주스다 말에. 소소 진짜 지 교수는 맞아 이제 정보세요. 유사고 거가 가요.
Why is this wholehearted resolve necessary? We need to assume responsibility for freeing all sentient beings from suffering. Now, each and every sentient being is a method for us to develop compassion, but more to the point, they are a method so that we can develop that compassion to its utmost extent. So we must develop a type of compassion that doesn't exclude even a single sentient being. So to avoid excluding sentient beings, we assume responsibility for their welfare. Yeah, we take responsibility for freeing them from suffering. Once you've taken responsibility for the welfare of other beings, then you need to develop the ability to carry that out, which is why we need to develop the consummate or ultimate wisdom, consummate compassion, consummate ability. Yeah, you need the ability to to set beings in a state of perfect happiness and help them to eliminate suffering, its causes, the seeds, and the imprints that are left behind by those causes. So we need these qualities of wisdom and compassion and ability developed to their utmost extent if we are going to carry out this responsibility that we take. The state in which in which these qualities are present is what Buddhists call Buddhahood. I mean, the person who has developed these qualities to their utmost extent is what we call a Buddha. This type of attitude is a mind that has the two aspirations, which Geshe has explained many times. Correct?
Okay, understand? Number
What are these two aspirations? Well, one aspiration begins with the cultivation of equanimity and goes all the way through to the development of the wholehearted resolve. This is, in particular, the aspiration that's intent on others' welfare. Right? The aspiration intent on others' welfare. Yeah, this is an aspiration, a mental factor or state of mind.
Okay?
The other aspiration is the thought that may I achieve consummate wisdom, compassion, and ability. In order to do that, in order to carry out the first aspiration, may I achieve these three qualities to their utmost extent.
Okay.
A mind that is accompanied by these two aspirations is called a mind of enlightenment. That's the name we give that type of mind.
Okay?
Our minds become minds of enlightenment. It's not like the mind of enlightenment comes to us from outside. If it came from outside, then all the rich people would probably buy it up, and people who don't have so much money, who knows if they'd be able to get their hands on it, right? But it doesn't come from outside. So we can get our hands on it, yes.
Okay? 두드려. 다시 시비때 세시에서 전주지 센세. 다 넘비주는 전주지 센세가 와서 된다. 인지결이야. 알아야지면 되겠어. 된다. 세 야쇼데 되대. 된다. This sense 먼저 건지죠.
This mind is known as the basis or support for the bodhisattva deeds. Yeah, in Buddhism, it's given this particular name, the mind of enlightenment. Right. This is the basis or support for the bodhisattva deeds.
다 대치부 거니 양보시오지로 와. 내 거니 되는 남도 산지 때에 토를 그러잖아. 내 토를 말해. 내 다 때는 싸워는.
This is the best. This is the best form of mind. So to develop that and cultivate that, sit there and cultivate it is, of course, very good. But you can't achieve Buddhahood simply by cultivating that alone. You use this as a root, as a basis. That motivates you then to engage in certain deeds. So you practice the different deeds. You must engage in the deeds like generosity and so forth.
Okay? 어땠어요? 근데 이제다 만도 지민요를 쳤다. 이제 이제다 고 신발이 주소 주사 주소 주요를 쳤고.
Once you develop the mind of enlightenment, then you must practice things like generosity. So that's what we then need to talk about: is how we practice or how we develop generosity and the other things that come from that. What does that involve? What is their nature and so forth?
Yeah. 주소 운영을 돼야 오늘 손주지 세트는자 이지 정보야지 다야 돼. 그러와 주소 주도셔네 아니 이지 정보 다시 맞지
Generosity itself is a method that helps us to improve our great compassion, our mind of enlightenment. In fact, it's through applying the practices of the six, like generosity, that we develop the mind of enlightenment to its utmost extent.
Okay? What do you 근데 일단 먼저 이번에 그때 가서 셰타리 봐.
2 weeks ago, Geshe explained the way to practice generosity, didn't he?
Yeah? What do you say? 이번에 제급이 진짜 아니 준비 뭐 다른 준비 아니 준비라 에나 아니 다들 치지 당시 치지 아니 문제 샤지 좀비 시작 어디서 좀 주시겠다.
Geshe explained the reasons why we ought to practice generosity, what the nature of generosity is, what the divisions of generosity are. You've got the generosity of giving material things, the generosity of giving Dharma, the generosity of giving protection from fear, and the generosity of giving loving kindness. 4 types. Yeah.
Okay. 어때? 윤주시하는 거 같지. 다 뒤주에 니빠 특징사 되래. 되지. 사실 말했다. 예수 주나네. 니빠 특징사.
That brings us to ethics. So the second of the 6, like generosity, is ethics.
아니, 니빠 특징캐쳐 버려 ethics. 특징자 되라야. 아니, 특징자 수급이 진짜. 아니, 특징은 뭐用的? 아니 주주가 이해와. 맞는지? 야? 준비는 시체네. 그런 지와.
Ethics is very important. In explaining the practice of ethics, and we must cover things like the need to practice ethics. Ethics is also going to have a nature. So we talk about the nature of ethics and what the divisions of ethics are.
Okay? 수축 뭐 되려야. 만두 너지 수위 참바 세네. 너는 너도나 수위 참바하세네 지가 그래. 단다 제놈 치고 너 처음으로야 아니 뿌리 참바하세네. 단다 치고 진짜 뿌리 참바세나이가 수위 참바.
Ethics is usually described as the intention to guard or a guarding mind. But the precious Lord Lama Tsongkhapa explains it slightly differently. He talks about the attitude of abstention, like as in to abstain. Yes, so a guarding attitude or an attitude of abstention.
Understand? 뽕이 템바세나 지 뽕네 아니 내 뽕이 이냐베 반자자고 그러와 어차피 아니 세주지 뽕이 템바세나.
The attitude of abstention is basically a promise or commitment to give a certain thing up. So you think that I'm going to give this up, and that commitment that you make in that is the attitude of abstention. I'm going to abstain from it, right? So, for instance, you might give up killing, stealing, sexual misconduct. Okay? You give up things like speaking falsely, speaking harshly, speaking divisively, speaking idly. You give up ill will, covetousness, wrong views. You give up the 10 non-virtues. Give up drinking alcohol. Drinking Coca-Cola.
아주 너들은 아주 딱 먹겠죠 써봐. 근데 어떻게 고요로와 공기 이전에 반이 수정에 지금의 전에 타제비 아니 선발 세주 선발지가 뿌리 선발하세요. 들리지 말아요.
You focus on one or one or many of the different 10 non-virtues and think that from now on I'm not going to do this, that I'm going to give this up. And so that intention, where you think that I'm going to refrain from this action, is this attitude of abstention, ethics.
Okay? 어때? 나 내가 뿌리 선발세요. 그냥 수이 선발세 대신 자그지? 다 점수. 근데 켈레지 제타가 있다. 다른 수등에 또 저기 매서 켈레 타가 있다. 아니 소수 레카 니자 찍으나 레카기 나니 아니지 또 제비 좀 제리야 로드게 문두게 송 센수마.
Where does this Where does the guarding attitude come in then? Well, you've made the commitment to give up certain actions like killing, right? So then you must guard against the performance of those different actions. So you in the different actions that you do throughout the 24 hours of a day, you watch to make during your work and so forth, the different things that you do, you watch to make sure that you watch to determine whether you're moving towards the causes for these types of acts, or whether you're coming close to the different conditions which lead you to act in certain ways. So guarding against the causes and conditions that lead to the acts that you've given up is the guarding attitude.
Understand?
The attitude of abstention, the guarding attitude. Yet these really come down to the same basic purpose or point, don't they? They should be understood in very similar ways. Yep.
Acknowledge that I think is the aspect of refraining. What about prevention? For instance, preventing someone killing someone else.
What about prevention? Is that an aspect of ethics? Oh, we wouldn't call that ethics. There doesn't appear to be a reason that would warrant calling it ethics. Generally, ethics is understood as a commitment. So it's a commitment that I am not going to do this.
그렇지. 어다 두지네. 다 두두나 추춤사. 다 추추 수기 진짜 가리나. 추추 뭐 들리지. 추추 뭐 보이 삼아서나이다. 수이 삼아서나이다. 마루스 노제 주들이야. 센수 부여하래. 안다가 난지비. 다 추추 수기 진짜 가르래. 되나? 당긴 간속에 제시해야 돼. 가르래서는 추추 마수나 아니 디피 왕기. 수준 마수비 왕기 년도 셰거야. 수준 수바이나 대화래. 디 왕기 den로 셰거야. 다만 저 마실 손을 담아이나 어떠세?
That's the nature of ethics. You know, ethics can either be understood as an attitude of abstention or a guarding attitude. Can I finish this? Can I? Yeah, I'll just finish what Geshe is saying and then ask the question. No problem. So that's the nature of ethics, either the guarding attitude or the attitude of abstention. Then why would we bother practicing ethics? I mean, what's the reason or the need for practicing ethics? Well, this relates to what Geshe was saying earlier, that if you, it's through failing to guard ethics in the past that we've committed non-virtues and ended up falling into miserable realms. Through guarding ethics, we gather virtue, which lead to happy realm rebirths. So one of the reasons to practice ethics is to avoid the miserable realms and go in to make sure that we continue with virtue and the positive things that come from that. We must make some effort, try different things to take rebirth in the happy realms. Did you want to? Okay, what was your question? Is it yeah?
If we agree that general understanding between ethics is a borderline on that, and the man behind me saying about preventing some killing, if you are giving Dharma to people to raise their consciousness and religious enlighten you, although that's surely part of it.
You would think that giving Dharma and trying to help somebody adopt a more enlightened point of view would be considered ethics. Mi shen la tene chigi jimpa tomba yina. Koran se tosti samlo tos gya chir panya tapsi chigi yoro asa pena konsa chanshugi sen saya de da konsa chanchu taegi samlo denso ako mako chitage yoro asa. Then so좀 지 고르면도 그래서 파트는 소좀 지 고견 지래샤사
수춤사한테 가서 그러고 수춤사한테 진주 그야 그런다고 그래서 내 단달라고 이봐 뿌이 단달 만든 놈이 유니 수춤사한테 진짜 지자는 거 알아 진짜 라소스 야지 민치바 임바 된다 가가 임마 마부 두아 아주 남비 주네 수준자들 저시 하는지 자요 뿌이 삼바 오늘 수이 삼바 어떻게 지는 저시 자요
개워 지득이 수준탄 sem진 된제기 수준 니야요 연결 Sochum is the word for, you know, ethics in Tibetan, and it means like the proper law. So ethics then in Tibetan, and as well as I think as in English, it refers to following certain guidelines, following a certain code. Yeah, that's probably a better way to say it, a proper code. Yeah, which we translate into English as ethics. So to follow a proper code or a certain code of conduct, etc., then you need this attitude of abstention, where you think that I'm going to give up and refrain from certain types of behavior, and you need this attitude or this guarding attitude to determine whether or not you're approaching those forms of behavior, so you can stop yourself from doing it beforehand.
Understand?
Yeah.
다야, 다야 만드지 가서 그러고 아니야 민지바이 말아. 저도다 가다 에틱이 있는지 세계도
어디?
왔잖아.
어디?
추춤선이 러와. 추춤선이 지 야포 제야 드솔이야. 지 러와.
어디?
야포 제야 드솔지데 아주 지 진주 커야한다고 지러와.
어디?
두자 제야데 진주 못 커야한다고 지러와.
어디?
진지 차니. 야? 추추 그는 너 저거를 했잖아. 너무 좋아요, 말.
So then, when we use this term ethics, that might have some broad connotations, so that when a person does good, then that's considered ethical. That person is kind of following the rules, so to speak. Or when a person does bad, it's considered unethical because they're not following the rules. Well, from this perspective, there's no reason why you couldn't consider these the doing of good things as ethics. I mean, there's no reason why you couldn't look at it in that way. But ethics, as one of the six we're looking at here, like generosity, ethics, patience, refers to an attitude of abstention. Even if in a broader context, ethics can cover other things. Driving along a road, there are certain stretches where you can only go 60 kilometers per hour. Other stretches you can go up to 100 kilometers per hour, right? So if you stick to the speed limit as you go along, well, could you consider this ethics? Yeah, sure, that's ethical to follow the speed limit. But if you were to go 90 miles an hour, or 90, excuse me, that's my American side coming through, yes, 90 kilometers an hour in a 60 kilometer mile per hour zone, then this would be, you'd be breaking the rules. This would be ethics, or unethical. Could we say this? Yeah? Those of you who drive cars. Yeah. It's possible. It's possible that the same term is understood in a variety of ways.
Understand?
There are many cases in which a single term has different meanings. Yeah. It's very important that we look into these and that we investigate and analyze what the differences are.
Yeah. 이제 좀비 쓰죠. 아니 단도지가 사.
개치디기
쓰죠. 선지 대셔기 쓰죠서니. 근데 이와 야그래 때 수중원에 때. 뿌이 셈바서니 쓰죠서한테 이제 좀비 쓰죠라. 수중원에지 미기다 그래. 다 여치디도 쓰지 대셔 쓰죠서달래. 수중이 미기다 그래 알았대. 근데 뿌이 셈바서야 디 배도 따다 너무 말해. 들이다 어떤지요? 수중이 미기다서요.
Geshe hasn't had a chance to speak about the divisions of ethics yet. But the divisions of ethics include the ethics of refraining from faulty behavior, the ethics of gathering virtue, and the ethics of working for the benefit of sentient beings. So this understanding of ethics does also include these other things, but the later two types of ethics, gathering virtue and working for the benefit of beings, are not really ethics proper, because they don't have this saying, the emphasis there is not on this attitude of abstention. So you can call them ethics. Yes, this is ethics, but it's not ethics is understood in this strict way as in the attitude of abstention. You might make a commitment to accomplish virtue, or you might make a commitment to work for the benefit of sentient beings. In which case, this commitment would be ethics proper.
Understand?
You make a commitment that I am going to give up ill will towards other sentient beings. that I am going to give up non-virtue and accomplish virtue. You could make these commitments, couldn't you?
Yeah.
These types of things could be called ethics. This evening we've talked about the nature of ethics and how that can be explained as an attitude of guarding or an attitude of abstention. And we've talked a bit about the reasons why we ought to practice ethics. I mean, because we don't want to fall into miserable realms, but mainly because we don't want to suffer, because we want to be happy. And this is the main reason we should practice ethics, right? Ethics can be divided into the ethics of refraining from faulty behaviors, the ethics of gathering virtue, and the ethics of working for the benefit of sentient beings. So please also know these divisions. We must practice ethics because we're cultivating loving kindness and compassion. In the end, this is what it comes back to. Because we're cultivating and trying to develop loving kindness and compassion, then we must practice ethics. Our motivation should be one of loving kindness and compassion, shouldn't it?
Okay?
The ethics of refraining from faulty behaviors would be like, for instance, giving up 10 non-virtues. This would be one of the main ones.
Okay?
The ethics of gathering virtue would be to develop, or excuse me, to develop and improve virtuous types of things motivated by loving kindness and compassion, and to give up the non-virtuous things. Then we have the ethics of working for the benefit of sentient beings. Working for the benefit of sentient beings is is part of the Mahayana teachings, but it's not easy. So we work for the benefit of sentient beings to the best of our ability. We assess our own capacity, and we work to that capacity, trying to help others as well as we can.
Understand?
No, once again, motivated by loving kindness and compassion.
Understand?
We know these things, but what's important is that we remember them, that we recollect them. So it's very important that we call these things to mind regularly. In ethics, mindfulness is very, very important.
Understand?
When a mosquito or a cockroach or something, say a cockroach walks into your kitchen or a mosquito lands on your arm to to bite you. It's at that time that you need to be mindful of the, benefiting, working for the benefit of ethics, working for the benefit of sentient beings. The ethics of refraining from faulty behaviors. The ethics of gathering virtue.
Yeah.
So if you're mindful of these different forms of ethics, what are you going to do when that mosquito lands on your arm? Different thoughts then begin to go through our heads, don't they?
Understand? What they do?
Whether it's the attitude of abstention or the guarding attitude. Now, in applying the Dharma, the application of the Dharma begins with karma and its effects. So, if we act virtuously, then happiness comes about as a result. If we act non-virtuously, suffering comes about as a result. So our application of the Dharma begins with karma, cause and effect.
Yeah. Okay? Well, do check. Do we take a until the usually does check. I mean, usually to do in your lecture. And usually
we'll leave it there for this evening. Next week or in 2 weeks' time, we can speak a bit more about ethics before moving on to the next topic, patience. So, we talked a little bit about the the nature and the reasons and so forth for the ethics, and we'll continue on with a bit more, perhaps, about the divisions and so forth.
Hey, Maruso, she number chi said, Nole said, so nipa do tumbare, Nole chegula. So nipa do tamba.
Osh.
Then do it. So nipa kazaya. She had the kazayina shigula.
Osh.
She had the kazayina shivaina, ani lalelka le lavachai. They is a Mazoya. Mambushina machina, Lalekan to Muduyander, then not chamber. Young Mambushini, oh, Chini Yungumudusani, but Sema Shimbaina, they are not chamber. Then not know my noise.
Now listen, in practicing Buddhism, our practice should be compatible with our ability, right? So when we practice Buddhism, we're trying to do so in a way that matches up with our own capacity. Okay? The more we know about Buddhism, the easier that's going to be. So to think that, what's the point of learning about Buddhism and knowing all these different things about Buddhism if I'm not going to practice it? That's a big mistake. Because the more you know and understand about the teachings, the easier it's going to be to practice the teachings. Also, you might begin to learn more and more about Buddhism and feel daunted by the prospect of how much it involves. You think about the great extent. But feeling very daunted and then becoming discouraged about it is also something you have to take care to avoid. Yeah? Okay. We need to try and first of all, practice, make sure that our practice is in line with our own abilities, yeah? And learn as much about Buddhism as we can. Not thinking, what's the point if I'm not to practice it? Or becoming too daunted by it. To thinking, I'm going to do what I can.
Okay? Well, don't 말하지. 삼번 방법체. 습관이야. 내 생각이 맞지? 가수도 있지. 아니, 구조도 다도 사람도 어디서 너무 두자 두대. 지 강투도 무시해야 가버려 돼. 지 강투도 가투도체. 또 전에 하다 받다 전에 너들은 아주 시디강이야. 스마일 해야지.
In short, develop a good heart, a positive mind. don't feel ill will towards anyone. And try to reduce your anger and envy and negative states as much as possible. Try to stop them. I mean, it's difficult to prevent them from arising altogether, entirely. But try to stop them to the best of your ability. Do what you can. So try to live your life in a way that you can die, with a smile on your face.
Okay? 좋아요.
Any questions?
Yeah.
Earlier on in this class, you mentioned that great compassion and Lama have a lot of similarities.
Mm-hmm. Geshe mentioned that the great compassion and mind of enlightenment had a lot of similarities. Could Geshe explain how they differ? Yeah. Ningje chenpotan chanjugi sem sayadi so double dus jisuyin ba.
Yeah.
Yine konse keba kare yoresa. Well, to begin with, one is a mental factor, another is a mind. Great compassion is a mental factor or a state of mind. Great compassion is a aspiration that it's intent on the welfare of others.
Okay. Oh, that Tashi
This can be assisted by another aspiration, which is the thought to develop it, these good qualities to their utmost extent, to achieve enlightenment.
Yeah. Well, then you say,
these two aspirations can then be developed in our mind, in which case our mind becomes a mind of enlightenment. The great compassion is it's a state of mind that helps to turn our minds into a mind of enlightenment. Would it be fair to say that great compassion is the seed of enlightenment? Not the mind of enlightenment, but enlightenment itself. Yeah. Then ningje chambo say de konse chanjigi semgi saben je. Chanjigi saben re lab. Yes, absolutely. It is an uncommon or unique cause for the mind of enlightenment. I mean, chanjugi sabe, and for enlightenment too. If you don't have great compassion, it's impossible to have the mind of enlightenment. So yes, indeed, it is fair to say that. Did you just?
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll leave it there. Rinpoche, Magye Panam Gyege Ji, Jepa Nyapa Nyapa Yang, Kone Kunte Bewa,